Alright, hello everybody. So this is going to be a bit of a different video from the type that I normally make. But today we are going to be making homemade wine from scratch. Opposed to a more traditional method of home winemaking, we are going to be using store-bought grapes. Winemaking and wine in general is really determined not only by your own practices, but the quality of the material that you're sourcing. So for today, we are going to be sourcing the lowest quality possible, pretty much. And this isn't really going to serve much as like a beginner's guide. White wine involves a lot of somewhat complicated processes. For a bit of background, for those of you who are not aware, I have been doing this. I've been winemaking for about 2 years now. Started out with making mead, and then about 6 months in, I branched into making fruit wines. Eventually, I started making whole grape wines, which is a lot harder. And now I've hit a point in this where I'm going to start making white wine, which, as we'll get into in a little bit, involves a lot of really complicated processes and, more importantly, a lot of equipment. So, with that being said, let's get into this. Now, some observant viewers may notice that in the corner here, I do have some red grapes. That is not for demonstration purposes. I'm sure that you're all aware of the difference between a red and a white grape. That was more of a personal choice. So, I have a lot of stuff spread out. Some of it is on camera and visible, and some of it is not. And we'll go through everything. Essentially, how this is going to work is the first part of this video here is going to be preparation. And the preparation for white wine is a very long process and again involves a lot of equipment. There will be some things that someone looking to get into winemaking can glean out of this video, but from the preparation side, not really. I wouldn't ever expect anyone to start with making a white wine, and if you do, good luck. There are ways to do this without some of the equipment that I have, especially the elephant in the room, which again we will get to in a little bit. But let's break down our materials one bit at a time throughout the process. Now, the very first thing that you're going to need to make wine is obviously your grapes. So let's break it down. Right here ahead of me, I have, how many is this? 6? I have 6 of these little cases. These are just from my local Costco because it was the cheapest option relative to volume. I have, each of these is about 3 pounds or 1.36 kilograms of just table grapes. These grapes are seedless, and as you may be aware, I haven't even opened the packaging yet, so bear with me. These grapes are quite large. Obviously, everyone has ideally at some point seen a table grape, you know what to expect, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with winemaking and what makes this so unappetizing or unappealing for winemaking, it has to do with a lot of things. And the number one, in my opinion, is the size of the grape. Because there is a very huge difference between this and a traditional wine grape, say a Sauvignon Blanc, is a very small grape. They're tiny, whereas this thing is huge. So we're going to get a lot of juice out of these. But it's not very high quality. It's not very concentrated, so the flavors are going to probably be very light. Tasting it, it's got some bite to it. It's got some acid, which is useful. But this begs the question: if we're making a white wine, why do we have red grapes? Is that going to affect our color? Well, no. Here's the very interesting thing about white wine. When people think about winemaking, and making it from home, you think about people, stomping it with their feet, crushing it, We're going to be doing something similar to that, but at its core, the fundamental difference between a red wine and a white wine in terms of preparation is that all of this skin right here, all of that, we're not using it. We don't ferment on the skin for white wine. So these red skins won't matter. The juice inside is white. It's clear. So we don't need that. Now, obviously, some white wines have a little bit of skin contact. something like, I think, what is Pinot Grigio? I don't know. I think Pinot Grigio has about an hour or two, maybe upwards of 6 of cold soaking. Either way, I don't know. It's worth noting, by the way, I have never made white wine before. This is the first time I'm ever doing it, and that would explain why I'm using such cheap grapes, because when you haven't done this before, I don't want to invest, probably about like $150. Now, we have a lot right here. And this should average maybe somewhere around a gallon of juice. Now, how are we getting the juice out? That. So, as of about 3.5 hours ago, I am the owner of a fruit press. This is why I've never bothered to make white wine before, because I'm going to use that contraption behind me to crush the grapes and to get all the juice out. I've never used it before. This is actually my first, obviously I've only owned it for about, 3 hours, so I'm going to have to do the setup here and all the preparation. Alright, so in order to get the grapes ready for that though, we are going to wash them and we are going to destem them. We don't want the, oh, dropped a grape, there goes that. We don't want them on these stems, we don't want the stems involved at all, we just want the fruit. So, I got a little bucket off to the side here, and we are going to just go through and wash all of these things and put them in the bucket. So let's do it. What we're going to do is we're just going to kind of shake them between our hands like this, and it'll kind of knock out a lot of the looser ones. It may get some of the stems in as well, and then we're going to have to go through and kind of pick all the stems out. The easiest way to do this would probably be with something like a milk crate. I don't own a milk crate. Why would I? So, we're just going to kind of do this by hand. And if some of the stems get through, like the little small ones like that, I'm going to just try and pick them off. If I miss anything, then it's not really a big deal. It shouldn't end up in our wine. And either way, it'll slightly help with the process of crushing them. Now, technically, before putting it into our fruit press behind me there, I could crush the grapes myself, just to kind of make it a bit easier. I don't have an interest in doing that because I really want this to be as light of a wine as possible. I don't know if we're going to get that, obviously, from a low-quality grapes like this, but I want it to look very nice, very light. I have a certain idea for how I want this to turn out, which is, again, hilarious when you're working with fruit of this caliber. But white wine has a lot of different styles, just like reds do, and you have some control over how your wine turns out. The winemaker actually has a lot of control over how the final product will be, even within like this same varietal or same type. So, for instance, a Cabernet Sauvignon would be a varietal. A varietal is a wine that is made out of a single variety, believe it or not, of grapes. And you have a lot of control over it. Even more so if you are sourcing the grapes yourself. I used to get mine through a business out of Livermore Valley, California. I live in the Southwest United States, so the shipping wasn't too bad, but in recent experiences they have screwed me over, and I'm no longer going to be continuing my business with them. Rather, I'm going to source them from a local vineyard here, closer to where I live, about an hour east of me. One other thing that we can do while we're here is this grape that is in my hand right now feels really squishy. Even with something as low quality as this, I'm still going to hold myself to a certain standard, and I'm operating under the standard under the standard procedure I use for winemaking. I will be throwing out bad grapes. We just don't really have an interest in them. Okay, well, there's 1 of 6 done. Without further ado, I'm just going to kind of sit here and process the rest of these, and I'll check back in a bit. So, have fun. Alright, while I'm sitting here and processing our red grapes, I'm going to talk about why I chose them, and why so little. So, there's this rule of thumb that you get of... Let me actually taste one of these things while I'm sitting here. There's a rule of thumb with winemaking that bad grapes will not make good wine. I very fervently agree with that. It's very obvious why. You know, you don't have to be an expert at this to guess. And we are, again, using bad grapes. So this likely won't make a good wine. However, the addition of a different, for lack of a better word, variety of grape will add a little bit of complexity to the wine, which I'm hoping will trick my brain in 3 months into thinking that it's better than it is. Now, will this kind of give a bit more of a winey characteristic to it that I may end up finding undesirable? Yeah, maybe. But winemaking at its core, at least when doing something like this, is about experimentation. It's about trying and seeing what works and what you like, so that in the future, if you don't like it, you don't do it. And much more importantly, if you do like it, you keep doing it. Towards some other ends, switched over to my 6.5 gallon bucket. Not because I was particularly afraid of running out of space, but just because I decided to use the 3 gallon bucket towards the latter half, the pressing, and you'll see that in a minute. Another thing that I'm going to talk about, that's bad grape, while I'm sitting here, is a key aspect of winemaking, something that you should never ever shill on or be lazy with, or ooh, a lot of these are kind of bad. You know, don't cut corners with your sanitization. Everything, oh, I'm just gonna throw the rest of these out, I guess. Everything needs to be clean. It's a lot more important in beer making. A lot of the characteristics of wine, its high alcohol content and its acidity, will do quite a lot to protect it from bad invaders like Acetobacter, which will turn it into vinegar, and various other microbes that will spoil it. And we do have a couple of protective factors that we will talk about in a little bit, and common ways that wine can spoil. We'll talk about that a bit more after we press the fruit, because it starts to become pretty prevalent then, and surprisingly early. I want to again make some things very clear. While I have never worked with white wine before, a lot of the alien or foreign nature of white wine really revolves around the preparation. Once all of our ingredients are prepped and we are prepared to start the fermentation, white wine actually becomes quite a lot easier than red, just for the fact that you're only working with juice. You kind of run into some very interesting problems with red wine, and some very interesting things that you need to be cognizant of when you're working with it. And the big one there is space. Red wine, obviously a byproduct of fermentation, is CO2. So you see fermentations and you see your ferments and you see your products bubbling, and what that'll do is any sort of solid material in your wine is going to float to the top. Wow, that branch came off easy. And this will cause what's called a cap to form, which you must press down. You don't want that cap to be exposed to air, otherwise you risk mold. We don't have that issue here. There is no solid material. We do also have some later options, exploratory options that we can do to this wine to affect its flavor. Some of them I'm not even really going to consider. The big one being malolactic fermentation. Malolactic fermentation, for those of you who don't know, is the process of turning one type of acid into another, much smoother acid. And a lot of red wine goes through malolactic fermentation. White wines either do or they don't, which sounds obvious, but it depends highly on what you want out of it. Another byproduct of this fermentation type is called diacetyl. and we don't necessarily want that for the type of wine that we're making. Some wines, like Chardonnay, are very high in diacetyl. It's what gives it that buttery flavor. I'm not really interested in that for the scope of this project, so we will not be doing it. Either way, we are down to our last container. This wasn't too bad. This probably took me about 15 minutes. This process of rubbing them with my hands, which, by the way, don't think I need to say this, but I will anyways. I have also sanitized my hands. In case you're curious what I'm using, I don't have it in front of me right now. It's somewhere in the back of my little supply closet, and I mean that literally, closet. I am working out of an apartment after all. Is a thing of liquid sanitizer called Star San. It is the gold standard if you will, for winemaking, especially home winemaking chemical sterilizers. I would highly recommend you use it. You just, oops, there goes that. You just follow the manufacturer's instructions on your packaging. Again, this isn't really something you want to skimp on. And a little goes a long way with this, especially on the homebrew scale. So don't be discouraged when you see like a $25 price tag and you're just looking to get into this. It does seem a little bit expensive given the fact that it is one component of many costs that you need to put in for home winemaking. People don't. It is cheaper to make wine at home versus commercially buying it, unless you have like a Safeway membership and you're buying $4 wines, which I do. It is cheaper to make it at home, and you have a lot more control over the results. The problem, obviously, is no one really includes the equipment costs in that. The equipment, though, is obviously very frequently reusable. So if you're looking to make wine repetitively, like I am, a one-time cost of $30 for some sort of container or vessel like the carboys and or demijohns, depending on where in the world you're from, is very much so worth it to me. So, with that being said, we are just going to take some effort to remove some of the acronym is MOG, MOG if you will, material other than grapes, just kind of the stems. I did end up kind of getting a little lazy here with the stems at the end, just out of an interest in having some abrasive material for the crushing process. I do think that this crushing will be happening in more than one set, because the wine press behind me is only about a gallon or so, I believe, and we are working with, I want to say, probably about 3.5 gallons of solid material. As for how much wine we're expecting to get out of this, I don't really know. When I typically buy grapes through the aforementioned wholesale place, typically 50 pounds will net me somewhere around 3 gallons, and that was before I had the wine press. With this, I'm not really sure. There are some extra things to be aware of when using the wine press. If we put too much force on them, then we are going to get some skin tannin extraction. If you don't know what tannins are, they are basically chemicals, for lack of a better word, that contribute to the body or the texture and mouthfeel of the wine. So, with that being said, all of this has been processed. Here is our raw material there. Okay. Yep, so here's our bucket. Here is our, just keep rotating until we find it, line here. We are up to, yeah, probably just above 3 gallons here on this scale. Sorry, that's backwards. Okay. And this bucket is very reliable for what it's loud. Okay, be right back. Alright, so kind of similar to olive oil, this is what we'll do. Let's move it away, move this away. And now how this is going to work is This little collection area down here has a little spigot. Let me see if we can move some stuff around. That'll work. Yeah, so this will drop down into our 3-gallon bucket. That's what we were using this for. It has been sanitized after the grapes were moved. See if I can get a good middle ground here. Definitely probably should have crushed the grapes first. Maybe we'll do that with the second batch. Again, don't know. Alright, we are starting to get some juice out the side. I see our first couple drops. One problem I'm having is that this isn't bolted down to anything, which makes this quite a bit difficult. Alright. We're getting our first couple drops, guys. This is fucking incredible. And this thing wasn't really that expensive either. I bought it on Amazon during Prime Day. So I spent a solid about $50 on this, which isn't bad. Either way, yeah, the main problem right now seems to be not having a way to bolt it down. Alright, we're getting our first couple drops through. We'll just keep pressing, keep adding weight. Alright, bad idea. This time I took all of it out and I'm going to go crush them. I'm probably going to go crush them by hand and maybe by... oh, hang on. Actually, not by hand. Somewhere in here. Let's go sanitize this. Be right back. So now we're going to continue what we did, but we're going to notice a pretty huge difference this time, in that we have what's called free running wine, or must in this case, unfermented juice. So we're going to pour this in. And the difference is going to be pretty staggering with how much we get out. Not do too much so we don't overflow it. No. There we go. So we are going to end up with something that is a little less clear. You can't really see it too well, but it is pretty green. There's quite a lot of solid, kind of for lack of a better word, junk in this. But because we crushed the grapes, we're now working with a lot less material, which should make this quite a bit easier. So, let's move on. Again, same sanitized bowl. Actually ended up re-dunking it in sanitizer between just in case. Cool. This is awesome. I'm thrilled. This is great. This was such a good purchase. And this only cost me like $55. It was like 40% off. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to press the rest of this same way, and I'll cut to when we're done. Alright, that was absurdly difficult. But now we can move on. So we are going to do a couple of things with this now. Let me reach over me. This is arguably the most important thing that we're going to do. And we are going to test our alcohol content. Right here, I have what's called a hydrometer. And along the line there, you can see those numbers in reverse. The highest is low numbers, so at the top it's at 1.000. Every single decimal down corresponds to sugar weight by density. People use bricks as well as a measure of percent sugar. I use gravity because, I started with mead. That was easier. So the sugar content of your fruit is very variable and depends on a lot of things, including the terroir, or the quality of your environment that the grapes are grown in,
and when they were harvested. I'm assuming because these are store grapes meant for eating, they're harvested at peak, and especially because it's industrial, they're harvested at peak ripeness, so they should be very high in sugar. We ended up with, I don't think this is a full gallon. This was pretty difficult. There's definitely some things I could have done better. I'm very sweaty. My entire floor is sticky. Yeah, this was a mess. Currently, it's been about 2 hours total. So I want to say that whole process took about an hour and 20 minutes. There's definitely some stuff I could have done better. But I think for the first time doing it, it went okay. And we definitely could have netted a higher amount. We're looking at a solid kind of greenish orange color as our hue. Obviously everything here has been sanitized. Shouldn't need to say that at this point. Quite nervous about this, obviously. It's too low, I don't really have any sugar on me, so I'd have to go to the store. Give it a spin. Grand. We are sitting at 1.072, which is just around 10%, which is very ideal for a wine of this type. I'm going to take a picture of this and I'll pop it on the screen. Either way, because this is sanitized, we can pop this back in. So now you'll notice that we've made no mention of yeast so far. That's because we're not going to be using yeast right now. Matt, what are we going to do? Well, because this has, it's been sitting in a Costco forever, and Eagle Eye viewers will notice that it was dripping, there was a lot of oxygen exposure. Now, we do want oxygen exposure at this stage, but not right now. We'll need it in about 24 to 48 hours from now. Right now, oxidation can cause our shit to turn brown. To avoid that and to kill any wild microbes, we're going to kill two birds with one stone using a Campden tablet, or sodium metabisulfite. So, these come in these little tablets. You can also, just buy it in powder form. I should really switch over to the powder for a couple reasons. The tablets need to be crushed, so what I typically do, and pretty much everyone else on the planet does, is just between 2 spoons, you just kind of crush them, and they'll crush decently well, but you do always kind of end up with kind of slightly larger solid chunks. We're going to crush this down. Let me, a little bit on my hand. So when you see wine, say, contains sulfites, this is half the reason why. The other half is just that sulfur is a byproduct of stressed fermentation, and so you're always going to have some. Now, obviously, this is a preservative, so I'm adding a preservative, and then our yeast isn't going to be able to ferment. Well, it's not going to be able to ferment right now. If we wait about 24 hours, this will all dissipate, and we should be good. But right now, all this is going to do is bind to some of our free oxygen, and it's going to get rid of it. So, now what? How are we going to get the wine into the bucket? We could pour it, but that would just end up with a bunch of oxygen. This is an auto siphon. Works by gravity, more or less. So this is one of the most essential pieces of equipment you can have. What we'll do is we'll point the tube end down in our thing, our receiving glass, which I will show in a minute. Don't worry. And the upper end will be here, and we're going to pump it a couple times. And there we go. It's now freely flowing down into our bottom vessel. Don't want to raise it too much just because that'll stop our flow, which we don't want. All right, this is what I'm probably the second most nervous about. We have our gravity and we have our volume. I'm very nervous about volume right now. Gravity I wasn't too bothered with because we're working with, fruit or store-bought fruit. You're going to have a somewhat high gravity. Our volume I'm less certain on because this doesn't have any volume measures on it, this bucket. So I don't know. I can estimate it's about 3.5 gallons, but it was hard to eyeball. I can't be entirely sure. So I'm going to let this go through, and we'll do the big reveal in just a couple minutes here. All right, so let's see. Drum roll, please. Whoop. And this is an old sangria bottle that my girlfriend gave me. So you may think that the space at the top is bad. It's actually not. That's not really a concern for two reasons. One, the Campden tablet will protect against that. And two, when we use our yeast, we're not putting dry yeast in. We're actually going to make something called a yeast starter. So that'll help with that. However, a couple other things that we're gonna have to be aware of. This is really pulpy. There's a lot of kind of solid material in it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm gonna probably pop this in our fridge for the whole 24 hours that it's sitting here. That'll also mean that if for some reason any sort of wild yeast is in here, if it takes hold, the Campden tablet doesn't stop a start fermentation, if that makes sense. It'll only prevent renewed fermentation. We also have this here. This little doodad is an airlock. We got some sanitizer in there, and we're gonna pop this. This will act as a one-way street, so oxygen and any sort of wild microbes can't get in. We'll give this a bit of a swirl and mix up the Campden tablet. In terms of color, it actually turned out quite a bit better than I was really expecting. I know that doesn't look great, but for someone who's been doing this for a while, I have an eye for how this is going to turn out. This will probably be a pretty pale gold, but we'll see how all this stuff collapses out. It's possible it could end up pretty close to white. It had virtually no skin contact time, which is ideal for what I want. So we'll pop this in the fridge, and I'll see you guys. It's 8 o'clock right now. I will see you guys in 24 hours to do the latter half of the initial steps. It looks like a bomb went off in my kitchen. My floor is absurdly sticky. The lack of support on the fruit press ended up being very difficult, and I have a lot of stuff to clean. So without further ado, I will see all of you guys in one day. Alright, it's been about 24 hours, just a little over it. It's about 8 o'clock at night. And we're going to move on, and we're going to start our fermentation. So on screen we don't see, obviously, our must. That's in the other room. I'm about to go and filter it off the sediment. I was going to rack it, which would mean leaving some lees, or not lees at this point, but some of the gunk at the bottom. But I think what I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to pass the whole thing through something I have called a hop spider, which is basically a giant metal mesh cylinder. It's typically used for beer making, thus the name hop spider, but it's also pretty useful for fruit wines and whatnot, because it allows you to separate it from the solid from the liquid, or the pumice from your wine, without needing to press it. Now obviously you're going to end up with some fruit or some juice left in the fruit, and from there you'd have to press it, but it's a good way to separate your free running wine. So if you're looking to make fruit wines, I would highly recommend investing in a hop spider. But either way, for the purpose of this, it's just going to be used to separate the solids. Now, is it going to be perfect? No. We're still going to end up with some solids in our wine. And we're going to talk about that and why that's a bit of a problem here in about 24 hours from now. But we're going to get our yeast ready now. And your yeast type matters quite heavily for wine. Now, if you were really cheap about this, you could use bread yeast. When I first started, in the first month or so that I was doing this, I was doing pretty much everything prison hooch style out of, like a $10 gallon mason jar from Target, just Costco honey and bread yeast. No nutrient, no nothing, but we don't work like that anymore. So we're going to use proper wine yeast. Now here in the American Southwest, there's two dominant providers for wine yeast. They are Lalvin and Red Star. Red Star, for any of you who bake, also makes most bread yeasts that you would get here commercially. I go for Lalvin over Red Star. I used to use Red Star, but I've switched over. Lalvin has been a lot more consistent. And you can just pick this up from your local homebrew supply store or Amazon. I used to buy a bunch of it through Amazon, but once I found the homebrew store,
Yeah. I am looking into making a bulk purchase of around 500 grams of a certain type of yeast called Renaissance yeast that is incapable of producing hydrogen sulfide. And there's a couple reasons why that matters, and we're going to get into that now. So, yeast is a living organism, and it needs to be healthy. An unhealthy fermentation will produce a lot of off flavors, a lot of sulfites, a lot of really nasty compounds, acetone, etc. And we want to avoid that. Now, I don't have a pH meter on me because, I mean, it was like $75 and I'm on a sleep researcher salary, so. And then pH paper had some, but it's not really as accurate as you'd want it to be. But we can estimate that this is going to be pretty acidic. Now, there's a couple things that will contribute to your yeast health and to your overall quality of your fermentation. We have the alcohol amount, like the sugar and alcohol, which are its own separate thing. We have the temperature, we have the pH, available nutrients, and oxygen. We kind of lump oxygen in with nutrients. Now, we need to manage these one at a time. Towards our sugar and alcohol level, high amounts of sugar will cause osmotic shock and kind of lead to your yeast getting really stressed. There's two ways around this. We can rehydrate our yeast, which will explain the water right here, rather, we have a lower sugar amount. So our yeast type, which we'll get into in a second, has a maximum tolerance of around 15 to 16%, and we are well under that, and we're about 9.5 to 10% if it ferments dry. If it goes slightly past 1.00, then we're going to end up with somewhere around 10 to 10.2%, which is a little low for a wine, by the way. I did consider adding sugar, but I wanted to keep this as natural as possible. Okay, so that's that for our sugar amount. Temperature. Now, wine is pretty interesting with temperature, and especially white wine. You should typically ferment white wines a little on the colder side. All yeast will have an optimal temperature range. And red wines like to be somewhere around room temperature, depending on your wine yeast, because this helps with absorption from the skins and whatnot from the fruit, as well as just, preserving color and quality. But white wine actually likes to be a little colder. I typically ferment around room temperature just because I don't have access to a good way of doing temperature control, and this is too cold. I think with this, I want to go a little colder because that preserves a lot of qualities you look for in a white wine, basically. So I think what I'm going to do is I may keep it in a little bath and just partially submerge it, like if this is our carboy, maybe up to around here, with some water, with some frozen water bottles in it. My thermometer shattered when I moved here, so I'm going to have to work around that. I'm probably just go buy another one. They're not very expensive. But yeah, I'd like to at least try to have a modicum of temperature control. pH, our wine is pretty acidic. White wine is. So that's just going to have to be a challenge. What else did we say? Available nutrient. We have some ways that we can feed it throughout the process, and we'll get into that in about 2 days from now or so, maybe close to around the 24-hour mark. It depends on a couple of different things. Then oxygen, again, we do want to keep it aerated, which means probably about once a day I'm going to take the bung off the airlock and I'm going to swirl it around. That's pretty much it, unless I've forgotten one of my little steps. It's likely. It's been a bit of an odd day. But so let's address our actual yeast types. So we will be using Lalvin QA23. That is backwards. Deal with it. I had a couple different choices for yeast that I could have selected for this. I was going between this and either D47, which I typically use for meads, or it wasn't EC1118. That's a very general purpose that I don't really go towards. There was one other one that I didn't end up going towards because it gave more tropical notes, and this is very citrus notes, and we kind of want our wine to taste a little citrusy at the end. I don't know. Either way, we'll give it a little bit of a shake. One packet is 5 grams, and that's good for around 5 gallons or so, so we are going a little overkill in that regard. But we have some warm water. Ideally, when you inoculate your yeast, you want it to be or by the time we pitch it, we want this water to be within about 10 degrees of our wine, and it should be by that point. So this does tend to clump, but if it does clump, we're using so much extra. This is the only cup I had, by the way. Not great. So we're just going to shake this in. Give it a swirl. Shake. Swirl. And this is just, we're doing this periodically just to avoid kind of major clumps. We're going to get some anyways, and I'll just dump the last in there. And one last really hard swirl. Smells like every other time I've ever done this in my life. So we have that there, and I can see that there's all of our yeast is there. So we're not done with this. For a long time, this would have just been what I did, just rehydrated this for about 20 to 25 minutes. But we're going to go a little bit further because this is a very acidic wine. We really, really want to make sure that it has the best possible chance of succeeding. And so we have right here diammonium phosphate, DAP. This will ensure a very strong fermentation. It'll basically kind of build up your cell walls in your yeast and give it a lot of additional opportunity to thrive. So we're going to use probably about half a teaspoon of this. I never actually know how much to add, but I figure it's good, especially with something like this, to veer on the side of caution. And with wine nutrients, there's not really too much of a concern about overshooting it. You do run some risk if there's any other microbes, but a lot of these wine types have something called competitive kill factor, which means it will outcompete other foreign microbes for nutrient. Now, again, we're not done with this. What I'm going to do is in about, say, 15 minutes or so, I'm going to pipe in a little bit of our wine must that's sitting in the other room after it's been filtered. And then again at the half-hour mark. So it's about 8:15 right now, so we'll do it at 8:30 and at 8:45. At that half-hour mark, assuming that we see bubbling in here and it seems active, we're going to pitch it into our wine, which is very exciting. We are getting ready to go. So yeah, this has been a very long kind of setup process. In total, by now, I've probably invested about 2.5 hours into this wine. By the time we pitch our yeast, it'll probably be sitting somewhere around 3. Yeah, so this white wine is difficult. If this was a mead, if we were just making honey wine, how this would have gone is this whole process I did right here, I would have done this. And then while this is going on, I would have just poured about 2.5 to 3 pounds of honey into a gallon fermenter, immersion blender, mix it together and aerate it, and that would have been it. Red wine would have just involved some crushing and some of an addition that we're going to get into. I have some pectic enzyme here, and that would have kind of been it. I mean, we would have had to done a bit more chemistry with that. We would have been a lot more thorough about testing our pH and whatnot. But for something like this, that was a pretty long process. This took quite a lot of work, and it's definitely not a very beginner-friendly thing. But once everything is prepped, once all of our must is ready, now we can look at this from this pretty much the same set of procedures that we do for every other wine. So this is where this kind of starts to become applicable to the new home brewer. And if you're wondering about costs, by the way, for everything I've just shown right here, this is where you're actually looking to not really spend that much money. The yeast, obviously price varies by location. The yeast was $1 about. The diammonium phosphate, this little 2-ounce thing, is about $3. The pectic enzyme is running you a pretty similar 1 ounce to $2 ratio. Obviously prices will vary. If you're going for consistency, go through an online retailer like Amazon, because you can buy all of this off of Amazon. But yeah, you're not really looking to break the bank on these sorts of materials because you're not buying these in bulk on a homebrew scale in small amounts like 2 ounces. Unless you're going really buck wild with how much wine you make, you're only really using about half a teaspoon per, up like anywhere from 1 to 5 gallons. So you're not really looking to break the bank on this stuff, which is why I would highly recommend that this is something that you don't compromise on. Because it's so inexpensive, the mileage you'll get off of it in terms of quality and presentation of your wine really can't be understated. So this is where you're going to want to spend some money, and you're going to want to do some research into what is good for your yeast. Anyways, so I'll be back. I probably won't sit here and show you me pipetting the must out. It's exactly what we did when we took our gravity reading yesterday. So I'll see you guys in about half an hour, and ideally this yeast isn't dead. Fingers crossed. All right, so we filtered off. Move my little chair forward here. We filtered off sediment at the bottom. Our volume's a little lower. We definitely didn't get all of it. I don't have a fine enough mesh sieve for that. So we're definitely gonna end up with some sediment, but we have a lot of headspace here to kind of counterbalance that. Even after we add our little culture here, it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty active. If I shake it, we do get a little bit of foam. Yeah, it's been just shy of half an hour. I'm willing to go dump this in. In addition to this, we're also going to pop in some pectic enzyme. Pectin is a very complex carbohydrate, and it will clump and form a hazing effect in your wine. Pectin works best in low alcohol conditions. So we're going to put it in now. We're going to use probably, what is it, about 3/4 of a teaspoon per gallon. We're using slightly less than a gallon, and I don't have a 1/4 teaspoon, so I'm just going to only use about half, but I'll make it a pretty decent scoop. I would prefer, for a lot of these things, I really do prefer a weight measurement rather than volume. I really don't think I don't think volume is the best. I'm just gonna pop this in the sink. I don't think volume is the best way to go about it. Glad I didn't put that important side down. We still need it. I don't think volume is the best way to go about it because there's a very huge difference in how you pack things, especially for powders. But I digress. Either way, we do have a lot of headspace, but here's the problem. If I don't typically ferment anything besides mead, I don't do the primary or the active main fermentation in a vessel like this. I prefer to use something closer to that 3-gallon bucket that we have, because any sort of solids byproduct of fermentation is going to be, like we talked about yesterday, CO2, and it's going to push that up. So that's another reason we really wanted to filter out a lot of our solids. I do have some concerns given the fact that we're operating at slightly under a gallon here for when the fermentation ends, because there's always going to be solids at the bottom. That's another thing. I don't like to work out of 1-gallon fermenters. Typically I working in a larger bucket means for 1-gallon project I'll make enough for about 1.5 gallons. And if we had gotten over 1 gallon of fruit, I probably would have used the bucket. Which definitely on me, I should have pushed for a little bit more available solids. Even going maybe as far as buying another like 6 pounds of fruit. But we'll make do with what we have. This is a very rare thing for me to do, to ferment something like this in a carboy anymore. I really don't use these for my primaries that often. But for this sort of project, where we're not working with too much solid material, we'll cross the bridge of sediment in about 2 weeks. Now, in terms of fermentation time, we are going to be veering towards a bit of a longer one. Fermentation happens faster at higher temperatures, and we're going to probably try to keep this around 60 or so, maybe somewhere close to 65. I don't know off the top of my head the lower bound of this, and that is definitely something to be very cognizant of, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around 55 degrees, I think. I haven't used QA 2.3, I don't think ever, actually. I normally go for D47. Again, I don't make white wine. So this is new for me, and there's a lot of phenological properties that we're going to be looking for with this. It's important to select your yeast carefully. When I was a beginner and being still relatively young at this, I've only been doing it for about 2 years. You don't have to be crazy particular. I'm getting to the point where I am, especially now that I'm starting to shift over, especially with the fruit press, towards making red wines. I'm shifting away from fruit based, like blueberry, blackberry, etc. I'm shifting more into varietal reds. So I'm starting to pay attention to some of the other byproducts of fermentation that you get, like glycerol and polyphenoids and whatever. But for this, we're just going to knock this in, and from here on out, this actually becomes somewhat easy. What we're going to do from here, and we're going to pitch our yeast as so. I do see a bit of bubbling at the top, though. That's just a distribution of oxygen. What we're going to do is we are going to come back in about 24 hours from now, and we are going to, there's a little chunk of the stuff in there. Let's give this a swirl. We're gonna want to really aerate this. Again, we want to give this as many possible opportunities to succeed. So off of site right now, I've measured this before. I just poured in I had a jug of from the store, basically a big water jug that equals exactly 1 gallon. So I know that somewhere around where it's at right now, right as it starts to curve, is the 1 gallon mark. So if we're working with a gallon right now, when we rack this off the sediment, we're going to end up with less than a gallon of product, which sucks. Oxidation is your killer, but kind of like what we did earlier, I think I'm going to have it in this one vessel until it's clear. That's a little unusual. Typically, you'll want to rack it at least once first before it entirely clears. But I think I'm going to, at least some people do. I think for the purposes of this, I'm going to kind of keep it really contained so that by the time it's fully clear, we get as much possible wine out as possible, and then we can transfer it over to a different vessel that's still 1 gallon, so we're going to have some space at the top. But because I know what I have a set aside carboy that I'm going to use for this, and we'll talk a bit more in the future about why the difference between this and the other one that I'm using, a wide mouth carboy, why it matters. The other one is a little interesting. We'll talk about it a bit now. I said that this was the mark for the 1 gallon. For this one, for the wide mouth carboy, the 1 gallon mark is actually right at the lid. So there is that to consider. So if we move this in here right now, it would pretty much entirely fill that vessel. And therefore, when we rack off the sediment, if we wait for that to clear really well, and the sediment cake, if we're lucky, and it really, really clumps at the bottom, then that means that we won't have as much headspace. We could top it off then with wine. I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I think I have a different idea for what I want to do for that. Either way, here we go. Okay, so we have our airlock on. This should start. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the next couple hours before I go to bed. And then tomorrow at around the 24-hour mark, we are going to do some checks on it, and I'll bring you guys back for that. Pretty good start. Yeah, this is going pretty well. I'm pretty satisfied. I hope it turns out good. But, you never know. Things can go wrong, and things go wrong fast. It's just kind of about how you adjust. So I'll see you guys in 1 day. Alright, so we're sitting pretty solidly at around the 24-hour mark here. Lighting looks a little different. Not that the lighting's been good the whole video. Yeah, I'm kind of working out of, obviously, an apartment space. So we have it off to the side here. Yeah, we're getting some activity. It's worth noting that temperature control is very important, like we talked about the other day, and I'm kind of experimenting with doing this at a lower temperature because I am in the American Southwest and it's like over 100 degrees Fahrenheit every single day. It's a little difficult to maintain even the room temperature of 75 degrees. So where I have this in my closet, I have it in a little bit of a cold water ice bath, which isn't necessarily ideal. And this is the first time I've ever really experimented with a lower temperature. White wine benefits from low temperatures a lot during fermentation, as opposed to a red wine where you'd be more than welcome to do it somewhere around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. For this, we're actually looking for mid to low 60s. So with the understanding that our ferment temperature control isn't going to be perfect, I'm just kind of settling so for somewhere in the mid 60s range, just around maybe 10 to 12 degrees colder than the ambient room temperature. Towards that end, we do have some activity here. The airlock is something that you're really going to look for. You see how right here is around where the water ends, and it's up to here. With no fermentation activity, these two should be equal here, and they're not. So we can see some high note of caution. A lot of amateur winemakers and homebrewers will use airlock activity as an indicator of fermentation. It is one, but it should not be your primary indicator. It never should be. You should always be going off of laboratory testing, which in this case would just kind of be a later gravity reading. Towards this end, I do see some fermentation. It was looking semi-vigorous. And if we shake this, we can see a little bit of a foam cap up there and some much better airlock activity. But I am very cognizant of the fact that because we are doing this at a lower temperature, this is going to ferment quite slowly. So we're not really looking for this to be done in the next 2 weeks. We should maybe average somewhere around 2.5 to 3 given our lower alcohol content. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this airlock off, and I'm going to just give this kind of a sniff. We're not really looking for anything too extreme. This isn't going to smell anything like wine. But what we are looking for is any sort of rotten egg smell. We're looking for that hydrogen sulfide in H2S production. At this stage, it would be incredibly shocking to see that, especially because QA23 has a relatively low hydrogen sulfide production. So, yeah, not really getting anything. It still smells a little yeasty, which would make sense for this stage. Let me just... Yeah, smells floral, crisp. A little bit of the green apple notes have kind of gone away a little bit. I'm curious if that's because it was filtered. I think a lot of that was coming from the pulp. We do have quite a lot of pulp in here. Wow, you can't see that shit at all. Which is fine. Again, we will cross that bridge very much so when we get there. But yeah, so I have off to the side here some Fermax Yeast Nutrient, very little left. I'm running low. Typically, I would do a stalled yeast nutrient addition, somewhere around 24, maybe 48, and then a third at 72 hours in. Given the fact that we added the diammonium phosphate at the beginning and we have relatively low alcohol production, I'm actually not going to do that yet. If there's no need to, if there's nothing off about it, if the ferment seems relatively vigorous given the temperature, the lower temperature, I don't really see any need to add anything that we don't technically need to, if that makes sense. That does not mean I won't be using nutrient. That just means I'm probably going to wait until maybe the second day to do it. I'm not going to show every single time that I do this whole thing, but I think it will be implied that on the second and on the third day, and maybe even up to the 5th or 6th, that I'll be continuously monitoring it like this. And either way, we're pretty much good until, yeah, probably until it ends. In terms of the yeast nutrient addition, I may not even show that. It'll be pretty much exactly like the diammonium phosphate, where it'll be a measured amount that I apply to the must. It's just a different product. But we may even be fine with just the diammonium phosphate in the beginning. Though I will probably veer on the side of caution and add probably about maybe half a teaspoon of this in about 48 hours from now. But either way, I'm going to let this cruise. I think this is it. I don't think I'm going to update you guys until we're done. So, yeah, I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. One other note is that the CO2 production here is actually... Whoops, sorry about that. The CO2 production here is actually very important because probably past a week, I don't think I'm going to open this again until we're ready to rack it. That's just because the CO2 is going to form a protective blanket to counteract this headspace. So I'm pretty sure that by the time we hit, I started this on the 13th of July. By the time we hit the 20th, I'm not going to open this again until we're ready to rack it, which means any additions, any modifications that we do need to be done before about the 7th day. In fact, I may actually stop that. You know what? Actually, just to err on the side of caution, because we really don't want undue oxygen exposure, I don't think I'm going to really even open this past the 3rd day, especially because we're fermenting at a slightly higher temperature. This is an unusually large amount of headspace for me, so I don't really want to veer into that, especially with how punishing oxygen exposure is for white wine. So, with that being said, yeah, I'll see you guys when we're ready to rack. All right, it's been about 11 days. On day 8 or so, I took a gravity reading, and it was sitting at around 1.000, pretty much evenly on that, maybe around 0.999 or whatever. And then earlier today, the 20th, I took another reading, so yeah, probably about 3 days apart by now. And it has not moved. And that's generally a pretty good sign that your fermentation is over. So I racked it into a little 1 gallon. This is the wide mouth that we were talking about earlier, where the 1 gallon mark is up here. Lid's off. I literally just did it. So let's point out some stuff with this, and let's go explain some of our next steps. So like we've been talking about with headspace, we've only managed to get probably around an 80% return. And it had started to clarify quite a bit, actually, which is another kind of good visual indicator if you're not doing any sort of lab tests that your fermentation is over. Once it starts to kind of clarify, no extra CO2 is being produced, and whatever amount there is kind of starting to blast out. Anyways, again, always go off of your hydrometer. Always do that. But if you need a visual aid, there you go. Either way, it had started to clarify, but I got really greedy with my return. We were pretty much down to the solid state, the pumice. So we ended up with around an 80% return on what we had. Also, we got a very fresh haircut. So before we do some of our next steps, the thing that I give the most of a shit about is how this tastes. I can't remember. I think it's probably been about 6 months since I've been this excited to taste something that I've made. Normally, I'm just like, whatever, it's mine. So we do have a freshly cleaned. There is some little bits of water on here. But it's actually a red wine glass. The reason why is not that I'm too broke. I have both red and white wine glasses. They were cheap. Whatever. But I'm curious about how this smells. And these glasses are better at that. So I'm going to take a little bit out. I'm going to place the lid down with the paper towel. Our little turkey baster is a little red at the ends because I literally just got done preparing a Merlot, which I'm very excited about. Okay, color-wise, we're looking like a pretty pale straw. By the way, this is a good time to mention, I'm not much of a wine expert at all. I just make this shit out of my closet. So any sort of descriptors are kind of just going to come off the top of my head and out of my ass. But in terms of color, it's actually looking pretty nice. Like I had said kind of from the start, kind of a really pale gold. I think once this clarifies fully and it's in bottles, I think we're looking pretty good at something kind of close to white, which is very impressive given the fact that I've never done this before. Yeah, obviously color concentration gets a lot more extreme when you're in larger form like this, larger volume. So it's clear why this looks so white versus this is quite yellow. It'll probably be somewhere around a happy average between them. Anyways, we'll aerate it. Yeah, we're getting some pretty solid kind of white wine. It kind of smells a lot like a lot of my meads that I make once they've immediately finished fermenting. Obviously, this is very young. It's only existed for, like 11 days now? So, a lot of room for improvement on that end. But taste-wise, given the fact that I held it at a lower-ish temperature, I'm very curious. You know, dare I say, I'm actually quite happy with it. Which is ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to say. I'm going to take a little more, which is a bit of a risk, given our low yield.
but I need to make a more solid opinion. I have opinions, obviously. I have quite a few. Okay, that's the last I'm going to take, though. Let's do a little... Okay. Yeah, on the smell, on the nose, it's floral. You know, it's got a little bit of that green apple. Not much. It's that all that kind of got blown out the airlock. White wine smells are very volatile, which is why we wanted it held at lower temperatures. I think in the future I'll be a bit more careful about it. I left for San Diego for 4 days near the end of the fermentation, but when I had left, it was at 1.008. So let me aerate this a little more so we can. Yeah. Once this kind of settles out and ages, we'll have a better opinion on the smell. Okay, so pretty much all of the taste, and I mean all of the taste, is on the very front and kind of middle of the tongue. Once you kind of get to the back and down kind of near the back of the mouth, towards the soft palate, it's completely gone. It literally doesn't taste like anything at that point. It's almost to the point where if I didn't know I was drinking something, I wouldn't know that there's anything there. Like it almost... That's really interesting. I've never... Like, it's like I've turned off all feeling at the back of my throat, which is really odd. I've never experienced anything like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with, again, the flaws of table grapes, where the ratio of juice to whatnot, to quality, it's not as high quality. Is it bad? No. I dare I say this is actually kind of a somewhat decent sipping wine. Again, I'm not a wine snob. If you took this to like a master of wine or whatever, they would say this is pretty bad. I want to see how this ages. It's pretty acidic. In terms of acidity, it's right where I want it to be. In about 6 months or so, I actually don't think I'm gonna mind drinking this, like actually drinking it. You know, versus drinking it because it's mine. It's actually not terrible. You know, it's missing a lot. Like a lot. You know? But I don't think this is the worst thing I've ever tasted, and it's not the worst thing I've ever made, which kind of means a lot. When you do this from home, and when you kind of teach yourself from scratch like I did, you end up drinking a lot of bad stuff. In terms of this versus a lot of the white wine kind of clones I've made a lot of meads over the years that I've fermented dry and kind of ended up making them somewhat acidic. I had one that was kind of had a bit of pear in it, and some pineapple, and a way to mimic a white wine. Is this worth it over that? No. You know, because of the amount of effort and the work that I put into making this, it wasn't necessarily worth it. But from a winemaker's perspective, on the fact that I've never made white wine before, this is a massive achievement. Now, let's move on. So, kind of forgot to prepare some spoons for this, so I'll just pop 2 out of here. I mean, it literally doesn't matter, because, you know, this is the stabilizer. Alright, so let's move on. So we are now going to stabilize this. I have no intention of back sweetening this, but we want to still cover our bases on a microbial level. We want to make sure this remains safe. It is high in acidity, but it's low alcohol, so we run the risk of that. So we are going to put in a Campden tablet, and we are going to put in some of our huge bag of potassium sorbate. Okay, so now comes one of the most significant, kind of not a fault in terms of like a wine fault, but like a flaw that you'll see with home winemaking, where if you pop in a Campden tablet and you've used any amount, or you have any amount of tartaric acid, this will precipitate out as potassium bitartrate. I guess the potassium sorbate will. Sorry. So if you stabilize and you have any amount of tartaric acid, which grapes are very high in tartaric acid, once it clears, you may get it as a wine. It looks like a wine fault. You'll get a bunch of these really smooth little jagged crystals in your bottles, especially after you refrigerate them. And white wines typically serve chilled. So to counterbalance that, we are going to, after this, stick it in the fridge for 2 weeks, maybe even longer. I may put this in for upwards of a month. The next time you see me, I'll be ready to bottle this, and my hair will be a little longer. Okay, so when putting our Campden tablet in, this is less than a gallon. We are going to put in a full tablet. Here's why. A tablet, one Campden tablet will inoculate this, a full gallon, with roughly 60 ppm parts per million of SO2, free sulfur, sulfur dioxide. This we're looking to overshoot to around 80. The reason why is because typically wine has somewhere around 10 to maybe 15 ppm of sulfur dioxide in it when it's drank. So why am I putting so much? Well, one, it's very volatile and it doesn't last in solution for very long. So we can afford to do that. But the extra SO2 will form a bit of a protective barrier against this oxygen. So that's how we're going to mitigate the headspace issue. So we're just going to pop this in. Didn't really do the best job crushing it, so we're going to end up with some chunks. That's chill. I'm going to pop in the potassium sorbate now. I've read some literature about the fact that mixing these two right now is kind of somewhat ill-advised. And I'm not really sure why. It can produce some off flavors, but in my experience, I've never had that. We are going to kind of head estimate a little bit less than a full half teaspoon of this. It's half a teaspoon per gallon. We're going to try and go for around 80%, and that looks good. And the potassium sorbate will dissolve pretty much immediately. Campden tablet does not. These things are quite stubborn. They don't really dissolve. This has been sanitized, obviously, before this, so I'm actually going to use this to stir without disturbing the surface as much as possible. We really want to avoid aeration, but we do kind of want to suspend our Campden tablet in the mix. Grand. Okay, so now I'm very excited to inform you that we will now be... Oops, our turkey base just fell in the fridge. Our little 80% full mixture here is going to pop in the fridge to cold crash, which will help stabilize it. But also, more importantly, we're going to hopefully get rid of some of those crystals that will be forming. And then after that, in about 2 to 3 weeks, should be looking good to bottle. Currently, it is the 20th of July. Estimating I may wait even a full month, maybe sometime in late August to do this. Probably somewhere around right now, in about a month maybe, but who knows. I tend to get quite impatient with these things, though I don't plan on using this vessel for anything else. Either way, long story short, that's about it. That's the only thing I have to do left is bottle it. And I may show that, I may just show the bottles. It'll be very similar to how we did it with this, where you saw us racking earlier on in the video. Every single racking is pretty much identical in that regard. But yeah, I think the next time we do this, I'll show off a bottle. And yeah, I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Alright, here we are. It is currently the 1st of August. I ended up moving this into bottles somewhat early just because I wasn't really feeling too optimistic about the amount of headspace I had. I just, wanted to get out of there early. So here are our bottles. There's my fingers for some scale. Here's a cork through it. A little bit distorted, but that's mainly just because of the curvature of the bottle. It's very clear. By my standards, this probably could have sat for another 3 weeks. I'm expecting some sediment to aggregate. It's deceptive right now. It looks very clear.
yeah, you can very clearly see my hand through it. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'm very proud of this. You can see from this bottle it's not entirely full. I ended up getting less out of this than I wanted to. So here's some from the bottom. You can see this is very much so not clear. That's some of the sediment from the bottom. I just wanted to taste it. Okay, so it seems like now that the sediment has kind of fallen out and it's had a little bit of time to, kind of work its magic, that initial taste where it kind of disappeared at the back of the mouth, that seems to have gone away. We have something that kind of, you get a complete journey throughout the mouth. This smells a little reductive, which is another reason I was kind of looking to bottle this. I didn't really want it to be on the sediment, the lees, for too long. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not bad. Again, it kind of does just taste like a Riesling, which is really what we're looking for here. So now we're going to bottle this. As you saw, we have some corks here. And to get these into the bottle, I'm going to stand up for this. I have a little hand cork. I'm planning to replace this somewhat soon, actually. These things are very difficult to use. But what we'll do is, you can't really see that too well, is there's a little slot here for the cork to pop in. Then we'll press down. I'm not really working on the smoothest surface here, so we'll have to see. I'm going to do this on the floor. Actually, I look like a hunchback. Jesus. These things are very difficult to use. You need a lot of force to do this, and just as an unhappy little accident, the corks that I use are too large. You shouldn't be using, these are number 9 corks. I had a stack of number 8s, but I ran out and I went to go replace them. I got number 9s, and these are too large. So I'll be right back, actually. I'm going to go cork the rest, and we'll do some closing remarks. Okay, you can see, especially on this third one, the corks are really sticking out. That's more of a stylistic concern. You shouldn't really cut this little top off. It's not really good because the inside's more porous and you'll let some oxygen in. But because there's a lot of headspace here, I'd imagine I'm going to be drinking this one pretty fast or using it for some sort of sauce. Okay, so let's reflect. It's very difficult, by the way. My apartment's very hot. I'm in the summer. So from start to finish, what did I think about this? The obvious, very huge notion for improvement is in the volume that we got. I think the next time I make this, I'm probably going to be looking for, I think, what did I use? 18 pounds. I think next time I'm going to overshoot to maybe about 25. As far as white wines go, I'm actually very pleased about this. I was really expecting it to be, especially after our initial tasting after the ferment, I was really expecting this to be really kind of flavorless. It's not. I don't really have much of a palate for white wine, or really much experience, rather, drinking white wine. I like it. And I think as far as a white wine goes, would I drink this if it wasn't mine? Probably yes. The color turned out great. It looks high quality. Maybe not visually because of the corks. Okay. Obviously that won't taste exactly like this because the sediment will kind of change the flavor profile a little bit. White wines are typically enjoyed very young, so there's no reason to really let this age. I think I'm going to definitely do this again in probably like a month or two, and I'll try it again. As far as the fact that it was the first time using the fruit press, first time making white wine, barring mead, I'm actually really, really happy with this. I'll give you a bit of a closer look about that. The colors is pretty much, I can't really say anything more about that than I already have. I think the color-wise, it turned out very well. I think the next time I do this, because I'm going to end up with a full gallon, I'm able to let it age for a little longer in the carboy to let things drop out. The time in the fridge really did it well.
And at the end of the day, I do think it was a very clean, very solid ferment. It was one of the first times I've really experimented with lower temperature. And I think that definitely paid off. Yeah, you'll probably see this again, in about a month or two when I turn it into a drinking video, just to give some more of my general audience an opinion on it, or a view on it. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think this was a really good experience with white winemaking. It's definitely going to be something that I'll do again. So keep an eye out for the one when I make red wine out of store-bought grapes, because I think it's going to be very interesting to kind of compare those two. And I'm very much so looking forward to that. But yeah, without further ado, this is a really interesting process. It'll be the first video I upload on winemaking. I don't know. Even if I don't really think there's going to be a big audience for it. But as far as just kind of something I've wanted to do for a really long time, I'm very happy about that. And yeah, at the end of the day, I do think this ended up a very successful product. It looks good. I think I can trick someone into thinking that this is kind of an early harvest Riesling at the end of the day, especially with the lower alcohol and the higher acidity. I think I can trick someone into thinking that this is a better quality item than it is. But yeah, either way, thank you guys so much for coming to this. I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled at how this turned out. And again, for the first time doing it, this being the result. Yeah, I the last time I tried to do something from scratch, completely blind, it didn't turn out nearly as well. It's hard to kind of do things completely blind in this hobby and have them turn out well. So I think it's a testament to how long I've been, kind of how much work I put into this, that this feels good. It feels like, as far as a result goes, this is a huge success, especially because I've never made anything like this before. So yeah, hats off to me. Hats off to you for watching. And yeah, I'll see you guys all very soon. I'm pretty happy about this, all things considered. Yeah.